Hello, hello. Welcome back. Well, we are getting very close to the end of our book. So let's see if we can get to an exciting conclusion this evening, perhaps. Don't know how many chapters are left, but this evening we will pick it up at chapter 21, The Mirror. What? Alex said. Her head was throbbing from being so confused. This doesn't make any sense. It needs fairy tears? We can't let this happen, Connor screamed. We have to stop her. She can't use the wishing spell. The twins struggled and fought against the ropes, but there was nothing they could do. It was too late. The light rose off the wishing spell and began to circle around the evil queen. No, Connor screamed. Please don't, Alex yelled. The evil queen took a deep breath. Wishing spell, I wish to free the man in the mirror, she said. The light shot toward the mirror like lightning. The whole mirror was consumed in the light for a few moments before it faded. The glass melted away like ice on a warm day. The mirror looked like a doorway into a very dark room. The twins waited in anticipation. The evil queen walked over to the mirror, keeping a cautious distance from it, but nothing happened. She got closer to the mirror, so close that the twins wondered if she was going to climb into it. Mira? The evil queen asked. Suddenly, a man fell out of the mirror and onto the floor. His eyes were closed and he was breathing very heavily. He was pale and seemed paralyzed. It was as if he had just awoken from a coma. The man was the plainest person the twins had ever seen. He had no distinctive characteristics whatsoever. He had spent so much time reflecting others that he had lost himself completely. Where am I? The man said between deep breaths. He had enough energy to keep one eye open at a time, but not both. The evil queen picked up her heart of stone, and the twins could see the change in her face and her body as she was reunited with its soul. She was a different person. She was a person. Mira, it's me. It's Evely. You're free, the evil queen said. Her voice was different while she held the stone. She spoke softly with love and affection. Tears poured down her face. The twins could see the reflection of the evil queen and the man in the mirror of truth. The reflections weren't those of a pale man and a hooded woman who were actually in the room with them. They were of two young people. One was the beautiful girl Evely had once been, and the other a very handsome young man that Mira must have been before he was imprisoned in the mirror. Evely cradled Mira in her arms and slowly rocked him. You're free, Mira, you're free, she repeated softly. I freed you just like I promised. I'm so sorry it took me as long as it did. The man opened both his eyes and stared up at her. She had only freed the very little of him that was left. The rest had faded away a long time ago. Evely, he said, and a slight smile appeared on his face, recognizing the name. The smile lasted only a moment. His eyes fluttered shut. He stopped breathing. Mira? The evil queen asked. Mira! Mira didn't move. He was as lifeless as he looked. His reflection disappeared entirely from the golden mirror. No! The evil queen screamed. No! The tears were running down her face much faster now. Come back! Please come back! Alex and Connor became emotional at the sight of it. The evil queen held the body of the man from her mirror in a tight embrace. She sobbed into him, still holding on to the heart of stone. She had worked her entire life for this, but she was too late. The wolves were starting to become impatient outside the castle. Many were pacing back and forth across the drawbridge. Others were lying across the entrance corridor, and one was sharpening his teeth with Goldilocks' sword. They had been waiting long enough for the evil queen, and they growled and grunted with restlessness. Suddenly, Malemclaw's ears perked up, and he looked to the horizon. The ground was vibrating as something large was traveling their way. What is that? He asked. A cavalcade of soldiers stampeded toward the castle at full speed. The soldiers were dressed in silver and green armor and came from the northern kingdom. They were led by Froggy and Sir Grant sharing a horse. Jack was riding Porridge beside them. All the wolves had jumped up. All right, boys, we're done waiting for the queen, Malemclaw said. We're going inside to get Red Riding Hood, and then we're getting out of here. All the wolves obediently howled, and they ran into the castle. One of them pulled a lever with his mouth, raising the drawbridge. The soldiers assembled on the edge of the moat. "The evil queen is in there," Froggy said to Sir Grant. "The wolves are working for her. They took my friends." "Evil queen," Sir Grant called out with his booming voice. "This is Sir Grant of Her Majesty Queen Snow White's Royal Guard. You have 30 seconds to surrender, or we will open fire on the castle." The soldiers aligned a row of cannons. Jack hopped off Porridge and found Goldilocks' sword on the ground. She was in there. "Prepare the cannons," Sir Grant ordered, and his soldiers positioned the cannons facing the castle. "Fire!" A cannon blasted the raised drawbridge into pieces. The entire castle rattled from the hit. "Prepare to fire again," Sir Grant ordered. "Hold your fire," Jack yelled. "There are innocent people in that castle. You mustn't fire until we can safely get them out of there. I have reason to believe Queen Red Riding Hood may be inside." Grant looked fearful. He couldn't have the death of an innocent queen on his hands. "You have 10 minutes before we open fire," Grant told Jack. "Get in there and save as many people as you can." Jack nodded without hesitation. If the woman he loved was in harm's way, nothing would stop him from saving her. "I'll go with you," Froggy said, secretly alarmed at his own bravery, which had suddenly swept over him. "You may need a hand." He and Froggy hopped onto Porridge. The horse took a few steps back and then charged toward the castle, jumping over the moat and through the large opening where the drawbridge had been a moment before. The castle's dungeon was small, but it had a row of several small cells. Goldilocks and Red Riding Hood's ropes and gags had been removed, but they were each put in their own cell, mostly so Goldilocks wouldn't kill Red before the wolves had their chance. The huntsman and the huntress watched over them like father and daughter hawks. "I just don't understand why my army hasn't rescued me yet. Shouldn't that be their top priority?" Red whined. "If I were Cinderella, none of this crap would be happening." "I outran your army because, like most things about you and your kingdom, they're slow," Goldilocks said. "Besides, they've probably already elected a new queen by now." "That's not funny," Red said. "This has been the worst day of my entire life. I didn't even know it was possible to be kidnapped twice in one day." The wolves stormed into the dungeon. Red went white with fear. "Soldiers are invading the castle," Malum Claw said. "We're not waiting for the evil queen any longer. We're taking Red Riding Hood now." "Get the queen," the huntsman said to his daughter. The huntress nodded and ran down to the opposite side of the dungeon and up a small stone staircase. She looked back before climbing it, not sure if leaving her father alone was a good idea. "No!" Red screamed. "You can't let them take me!" She looked all over the dungeon, unsure who she was talking to. She didn't have any friends here. "I'm ready for this day to be over." "Fine, you can take her," the huntsman said to the wolves. He unlocked her cell, and Red jumped up and pushed the door open, knocking the huntsman back into the wolves. She ran as fast as she could down the other side of the dungeon and up the stone staircase the huntress had climbed. "After her!" Malum Claw ordered, and he and his pack ran after the young queen. She managed to get a head start as the wolves had trouble fitting into the staircase. Moments later, Jack and Froggy emerged into the dungeon. Jack was wielding Goldilocks' sword. "Stand back!" Jack yelled at the huntsman, who backed into a corner with his hands up. "Jack," Goldilocks said, clutching the bars of his cell. "What are you doing here?" "Porridge found me," Jack said. "I knew something must be wrong because you weren't with her. She led me here, and I met up with Snow White's army on the way." They stared at each other so lovingly that it made Froggy uncomfortable. "Splendid. I'll find Red Riding Hood and the twins while you reunite," he said, and hopped back in the direction they'd come from. The huntsman pulled a crossbow out from under his fur coat. "Jack, watch out!" Goldilocks screamed. The huntsman began shooting arrows at Jack. He ducked and dived, barely eluding them. Goldilocks had to dodge the arrows too. They were ricocheting off the stone walls in every direction. The huntsman moved like a machine, reloading his crossbow instantaneously each time he fired. Goldilocks picked up an arrow that had landed near her and began picking the lock of her cell with the arrowhead. Jack was trying to block the arrows with his sword. It was getting harder. The arrows were coming at him much faster. He hit one perfectly, and it flew behind the huntsman. The huntsman grunted and froze. His eyes bulged, and he fell flat on his face. The arrow had bounced off the wall behind him and was now sticking out of his back. The huntsman was dead. "Jack, behind you!" Goldilocks yelled. Jack turned around and the huntress stabbed him in the arm with her dagger. She had seen the whole thing. "Ah!" Jack screamed. He dropped the sword and fell to the ground. He crawled across the floor and sat himself up against the wall. He was clutching his arm. Blood was everywhere. The huntress walked toward him with her dagger raised. She didn't speak, but she had pure rage in her eyes. As far as she was concerned, Jack had just killed her father. She swooped toward him for a fatal strike. Goldilocks blocked the dagger with her sword. She had picked the lock of her cell and repossessed her sword just in time to save Jack's life. "I think it's time you and I had a little girl talk," Goldilocks said, and kicked the huntress in the stomach. The huntress rolled to her side of the room and hopped back to her feet. Goldilocks and the huntress circled each other for a moment. They stared each other down, waiting for the other to make the first move. Goldilocks swung her sword at the huntress, and the duel began. The huntress only had a dagger half the size of Goldilocks' sword, but she used it well. Goldilocks had finally found her match. They moved all around the dungeon, each shielding offensive strikes from the other. The huntress cornered Goldilocks. Goldilocks ran up the wall and flipped over the huntress, cornering her now. "Where did you learn to do that?" Jack asked. "I'll tell you later," Goldilocks said. The huntress headbutted Goldilocks and ran out of the dungeon. "Come back here," Goldilocks called out and chased after her. They continued their fight throughout the castle, climbing higher and higher as they went. Meanwhile, Red Riding Hood was being chased through the castle by the big bad wolf pack. She was running for her life, and tears were streaming down her face. She had only been this scared once before, an infamous day when she'd visited her grandmother as a child. Red wasn't crying from fear alone, though. She was also upset that she was getting one of her favorite dresses ruined. Red also wished she had chosen better shoes for running when she had dressed herself earlier this day. She reached one of the highest levels of the castle. Areas of the floor had rotted away, and she had to be very careful not to fall through any of the large holes that would drop her several stories below. The wolves behind her were not being so cautious. They had a hard time getting traction on the smooth wooden floor and kept slipping into the holes, howling as they fell to their deaths. Red ran up a wooden staircase. The upper half of the staircase crumbled away in front of her as she passed the landing. "That's not good," Red said. She looked back at the steps behind her and saw Malemclaw. She was trapped. The wolf made his way toward her one step at a time, enjoying the aggravation it caused her. "I've waited for this moment for over a decade," Malemclaw growled. "Oh my, what big claws you have," Red said, trembling. "The better to maul you with, my dear," Malemclaw said. Red had never expected to die like this. She had always imagined it would be back in her castle with dozens of her and Jack's children by her bedside. "Oh my, what big teeth you have," Red said. "The better to bite you with, my dear," Malemclaw said. He was just a few feet away. He arched his back, ready to pounce. Suddenly, a quiet whistling sound came from outside the castle. A cannonball crashed through the wall and directly into Malemclaw. The stairs collapsed, and the wolf was knocked into the next room. If he had survived, he wouldn't be in one piece. "Oh my," Red said. She grasped onto the banister of the stair landing as if her life depended on it. The steps on either side of her were gone. She was truly stuck now. The landing started to teeter. The wood below it was starting to crumble. "Oh my, oh my, oh my," Red screamed. The banister collapsed, and Red fell. She screamed the entire way down. Just a few seconds before Red was about to hit the floor, Froggy jumped into the air and caught the young queen. They both landed safely, courtesy of his strong frog legs. "You saved my life," Red said with big, thankful eyes. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced, Your Majesty," Froggy said. "My name is—" Froggy never got to finish. Red was repeatedly kissing his cheek. He turned dark green. Who knew a frog could brush? This is a tricky one. Who knew a frog could blush? The castle began to shake as more cannons were fired. "They've started the attack," Froggy said. "We have to find Connor and Alex and get out of here." Alex and Connor didn't know what was going on. All they could hear was the clanking of swords and the whimpering of wolves from outside the great hall, and the muffled announcements of the soldiers outside of the castle. They felt the castle shaking and falling apart around them. Cannonballs began busting through the walls of the great hall. Big stone chunks of the ceiling began to fall around them. They knew they had to get out of the castle as fast as possible. "Your Majesty," Alex asked the evil queen, "we have to get out of here. The castle is falling apart?" The evil queen didn't respond. All she could do was cry over the body of her former lover. "If we don't get out of here soon, we're going to make Humpty Dumpty's accident look like a scrape on the knee," Connor said. The evil queen wasn't listening to them. She was so grief-stricken that she couldn't hear. She didn't even seem aware of what was happening to the castle. "Evely, please, you have to untie us," Alex pleaded. "Just drop the stone and you won't feel all this sadness." The doors into the great hall creaked open and Froggy ran into the hall. Red watched from the doorway, panicked by all the destruction. "Froggy!" Connor yelled. "Untie us before we're crushed." "I'm coming, children," Froggy said. He hopped across the room and quickly began untying them as fast as he could. It was difficult, though. The knots were tight. He untied Connor first, and the two worked together to free Alex. "Please hurry," Red called from the doorway. "My castle's being remodeled, and I'd really like to see it before I die." Alex was finally freed. Connor and Froggy ran toward the door, but Alex went to the table and started putting all the wishing spell items back into her bag. "What are you doing?" Connor yelled. "What part of imploding castle do you not understand?" "I'm not living without these," Alex said. "We made promises to return and to destroy them, remember?" The wishing spell was starting to wear off on the magic mirror. The glass was starting to grow back. A cannonball hit the wall closest to the mirrors. The golden mirror was knocked over by the blast and shattered across the ground. The magic mirror started rocking, about to fall at any moment. "Evely!" Alex yelled. "Please come with us." She was ignored. The magic mirror fell on top of the evil queen and Mira and scattered into 1,000 pieces on the ground. But the evil queen and Mira were nowhere to be found. The mirror had swallowed them just before it shattered. Alex ran over and started searching for any trace of the evil queen or Mira, but there was nothing to find except for bits of broken glass. The only thing Alex managed to find was the evil queen's heart of stone. She put the stone in her bag. Then she turned to run toward the door with her brother and Froggy. But something else caught her eye on the floor. It was her reflection in a piece of the golden mirror. It was so bright and colorful that she saw herself smiling in it, and there was something behind her, something moving, like wings. "Come on, Alex," Connor yelled. "I don't want to be an only child." "Coming," she said. She ignored the glass and joined her brother, Froggy and Red, in the doorway of the crumbling great hall. They found Jack in the corridor outside the great hall, still holding on to his wounded arm. Porridge was impatiently waiting there too, not wanting to leave without her mistress. "Jack," Red said and went to embrace him. "You came." "I didn't come for you," Jack said and refused to let her touch him. "Where's Goldilocks?" Red put a hand on her chest that was short of breath. Pure heartbreak started to consume her like a delayed poison. He really was in love with Goldilocks. "Let me get everyone to safety, and then I'll go back for her," Froggy said. "I'll go with you." "Ah!" Jack had begun to speak, but screamed when he tried to move his arm. "No, you won't," Froggy said. One by one, Froggy took hold of Alex, Connor, Red, and Jack and leapt with them across the moat. Porridge took some convincing, but Jack coaxed her into hopping over the moat with them. They joined the soldiers, many of whom bowed upon seeing Queen Red Riding Hood. "Forgive my hair, gentlemen," Red said. "It's been a rough day." "Where's the evil queen?" Sir Grant asked. "She's gone," Alex said softly. "Gone?" he asked. "Yes," Alex said sadly. "Trust me, you won't have to worry about seeing her again." Sir Grant nodded. A huge weight had been lifted off his shoulders and the shoulders of his kingdom. "Where was Goldilocks when you last saw her?" Froggy asked Jack. "She was fighting that woman. I don't know where they went," Jack said. "There she is," Connor said, pointing upward. Everyone raised their heads to look. Near the very top of the castle, Goldilocks and the huntress were still dueling on the roof. No one could do or say anything. They all just watched the fight with their mouths and eyes wide open. Neither of the women seemed to have an advantage over the other. It was going to be a fight to the finish. The castle was disintegrating around them, but they kept fighting, each determined to kill the other. Their fight had turned into a battle. They swung their weapons toward each other more violently than ever. Part of the roof near where they stood caved in, and Goldilocks lost her balance. She dropped her sword while trying to regain her footing. The huntress saw this as an opportunity to strike. She raised her dagger high above her head. It was aimed for Goldilocks, and there was nothing she could do to defend herself. "No!" Jack yelled. He ran over to a cannon and lit it. He wrenched it towards the huntress's direction, and it fired. A cannonball soared toward the women and blasted away the section of the roof the huntress was standing on. She fell the entire height of the castle and into the moat, silently screaming the entire way. There was no way she could have survived that fall. Goldilocks found her balance and lovingly looked down at Jack. They shared a moment of blissful eye contact before disaster struck again. Dust rose as the castle began to collapse completely underneath Goldilocks. "Goldilocks!" Jack yelled. "I can't watch," Alex said, and buried her face in Connor's shoulder. It was hard to see anything through the dust. The sound was thunderous. Thousands upon thousands of stones were falling on top of one another. Many rolled over into the moat. The dust eventually cleared out of the stones that had settled. The castle was now just a massive pile of stone bricks, and Goldilocks was nowhere to be found. "Goldilocks?" Jack hollered, running along the edge of the moat, trying to find any trace of her. The odds didn't seem in her favor. Froggy jumped across the moat and disappeared into the debris. Everything was silent. The twins thought Jack was going to have a heart attack while waiting. Every second that he didn't see anything felt like an hour. Slowly but surely, 2 figures made their way through the wreckage. It was Froggy, and he was helping Goldilocks through the rubble. She was limping, but she was alive. The twins cheered, and Jack fell to his knees. They had never seen anyone so thankful in their lives. Froggy leaped over the moat with Goldilocks, and she and Jack glided into each other's arms. They shared a kiss so passionate that a few of the soldiers blushed. It was love personified. Red Riding Hood could feel her entire body ache with heartbreak as she watched the scene. This may have been the only time she hadn't gotten what she wanted, and Jack had always been what she'd wanted more than anything. Porridge happily pranced over to Goldilocks, who petted her horse's mane. "I'm all right, girl," Goldilocks said. "I'm just banged up a little." "Goldilocks," Sir Grant called out officially. "You're under arrest." "Wait a second, hold on," Jack said, standing in the way of the approaching guards. He turned and gave Red a scornful look. "Do something?" At first, Red didn't know what to say. She'd never done anything really official or queen-like. "The Red Riding Kingdom would like to pardon Goldilocks for all the crimes she's committed," Red said. "And it's a very long list." "That may be," Sir Grant said, "but you can't pardon all the crimes she committed in other kingdoms. She's going to spend the rest of her life in prison. Seize her." Very well. Well, that's the end of chapter 21. And I think our next trip out will probably be the last one. Well, maybe there's a few more chapters left. We'll see. But until then, we'll have to park it for the time being. And when we come back for chapter 22, we will learn Snow White's secret. But until then, it's gotten late. Now I've gotten tired. So it's time for me to get some sleep.